Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Exploring Sacred. Welcome to a brand new and beautiful day. It is a gorgeous day and a beautiful one here in the Enchanted Forest. And I hope that you're enjoying a beautiful day wherever you happen to be. Gee, this morning, normally my show begins right at 10 a.m. And this morning, another busy morning with clients and every other thing that happens here in the Enchanted Forest. So, here we are just a little bit later than usual at 10:30. For those of you that are out there listening wherever you happen to be, thank you for tuning in. And those of you that are listening via YouTube, thank you for listening via YouTube, and thank you for subscribing to my YouTube channel. It's pretty exciting. Hey, Janet, how are you? Interesting times we're living in, isn't it? Gets more interesting by the moment, I do believe. And sometimes it's just really good to take a moment to sit in sacred space. So I thought we could begin this morning, this Wednesday morning, with a great big deep breath in. For those of you that haven't even had time to do that yet today, just to take a deep breath in, down to the tips of your toes and beyond, and exhale. Another deep breath in to the tips of your fingers and beyond, and exhale. And another great big deep breath in to the top of your crown chakra, right up through the top of your head and beyond, and exhale. And just take a moment to give gratitude for your body. Thank you to my body. Thank you to my feet, right? To my heart, to my lungs. Thank you to my physical vehicle that allows my soul to have this human experience on Grandmother Earth. Thank you. Infinite love and gratitude to my body. That's kind of a cool way to start the morning or an afternoon or an evening. Hey, Donna Kang. Hey, Katie Battle. Joining me and Janet Smith here in the chat room this morning. Sacred, exploring sacred. This morning, I began with clients bright and early. I love being able to do client sessions via Zoom. I really enjoy that. It's a pretty cool way to do things, to get to see people face to face and in our own space and talking about sacred and the need for sacred. Right now, I think everybody needs has a little need of sacred space. Creating a place to just be quiet or to feel safe. Sacred space. Outdoors, indoors, something sacred, something that nurtures the soul. For some people, that word sacred, it means secret. And for some people, the word sacred means I hold it in high regard. So to me, it's sacred. And I think that there are some things that are kind of secret, but mostly I believe that there are a lot of things I just hold in high regard. And some of that is my space, my personal sacred space. And some people don't have great big spaces to make into their sacred space, but you can have a sacred space on top of a counter or a dresser or somewhere outdoors, just a little slice of something, of space. That's where you go to sit with soul, to sit with the ancestors, to sit with Creator, the angels, Wakantanka, the Tunkashilas, by whatever name we call that source of our being. Spending a little time there every day, I think, does make a difference. I feel it makes a difference. I know it makes a difference, at least for me, having some sacred space. I'm somebody who loves incense, so I've got quite a collection of incense. I could probably be like an incense museum. I'm a curator of incense, I think. I love it. I think if there's one thing people can say that I have a wee bit of an addiction to, it's purchasing incense, sharing incense. I love it because it creates a sacred space. It's like music. You know how having music can take us to another time, can take us to a memory, it can take us to a thought, to a feeling. For me, that very same thing happens with incense. The smell of a really good incense does that for me. Donna's saying, I'm living mine today. You're lighting yours today, living yours today. Yeah. Wonderful incense. Janet Smith over there across the pond, my dear Scottish friend. How do you create a sacred space? Katie, how do you create a sacred space? What is sacred for you in your space? Every day I get a lot of requests for prayers. Will you hold my loved one in prayer? Will you hold me in prayer? Will you keep so-and-so in your prayers, my dog, my cat? Will you say a prayer? I get that at least once a day, sometimes many, many, many times during the course of my day. Denise, Dana, will you hold X, Y, or Z in prayer? Will you keep a prayer? Sometimes in the middle of the night, right? I get these messages because that's what I do. And I have sacred space for prayer. But I think every space is sacred. You know, when it comes right down to it, it's do we hold it in high regard? When I'm out in the enchanted forest, no, there's some sacred space. When I'm out at Lake Michigan, sunsetting at Lake Michigan, breathtaking, sacred space. Todd and I are getting ready to go up to Copper Harbor, Michigan. Where is that? Way up across the Mackinac Bridge, right there next to our Canadian neighbors, the furthermost point in Michigan, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And that is some sacred space. Good morning, Lily. Todd purchased a camper last week. I did have a camper, and a couple of Elise's friends were looking for a camper. So we sold the camper that came with our home to this really cute young couple. And I've been missing having a camper. Not that we ever took it anywhere, but it's always just been part of the house. So for me, that camper was even a bit of sacred space, a little getaway. We called it the lily pad. And having the gypsy soul that I have, because I do have a gypsy soul, I'm always on the move. I like to be on the move. I like to be traveling and seeing and adventuring to new sacred spaces. Todd and I went and purchased a 26, 27 foot camper, one that we can bring Dominic and Gabriel along with us. And so we mapped out our very first trip, long trip, that'll happen in September over our anniversary, up to Hiawatha National Forest and Copper Harbor in Michigan. That's sacred. Sacred spaces come in all shapes and sizes. Janet is saying, I have a quiet, special place in nature I love to be. Lily saying, how fun, a new adventure. Yeah. Looking forward to it. Yeah, exactly, Katie. Where the sidewalk ends in Michigan. It's so beautiful up there, a different world. It is. Once you cross the Mighty Mac, as they call it, the Mackinac Bridge, it is a different world in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. It is spectacular up there. They still have snow in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, sometimes well into April and May in certain parts. And for me, my dad and I one time, probably 12 years ago, because my dad, the Sarge, was a hockey coach and a hockey player. Of course, from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Both of my adoptive parents were from the Upper Peninsula, Newberry, Michigan. So they were good Yoopers from a long line of Yoopers, as we call them here. And one year we went to the outdoor hockey extravaganza, right, tournament, right there at St. Ignace. So you cross the Mackinac Bridge, and all of St. Ignace, the entire town, turned into a hockey village. And the hockey was actually played out on the lake. So it was outdoor hockey. And it was really cool because the Detroit Red Wings members were there. And all right, so there's me and the Sarge out there in our Muckaluck hats, because if you go to the UP, you have to have a really good Muckaluck hat. And I have a few of those Muckaluck hats. And there we were, watching hockey out on the Great Lake. Yeah, it's a different world up there. It's a different way of being. Different way of being. This morning, one of my clients said to me, "Hey, have you ever been to Georgia?" I said, "Well, as a matter of fact, I have. Born there, spent a few years there. I'm back there now." Oh, goodness, upon occasion. It's so beautiful down there. Well, it is beautiful down there. Those mountains and those. Sacred is really kind of where we find it, I guess, is my whole point of everything. And so my client this morning talking about the sacredness that she finds in Georgia. It's a beautiful place to be. Of course, Scotland, right, Lily? Right, Laura Smith, if you're listening. What's your favorite place on planet Earth, Laura? That would be Scotland, right? It's one of mine as well. There's something very raw and majestic. I feel that way too about Wales. There are so many places, beautiful places here on Grandmother Earth. And when I can't be in Scotland or Wales or England or Egypt, wherever, Italy, wherever far-flung place I've traveled to, one of the things that I gift myself with is the music of, right? The music of Ireland, the music of Scotland, the music of Appalachia, right? The music of Georgia, rock and roll music, Southern rock, right? My son Dane has always been a huge Southern rock fan, so he was really sad when Charlie Daniels, well, who wasn't sad when Charlie Daniels passed away this week, right? And Dane immediately got a hold of me. "Mom, sad news, Charlie Daniels died today." Right. Here he is wearing his 40th anniversary Charlie Daniels Devil Went Down to Georgia t-shirt that I got for him. Sacred music. Music can make spaces so sacred and take us to those places. I've got great music here in the home. Sometimes I'm visiting Ireland in my soul, England, Wales, Scotland, the south of the United States, the west, Sometimes I've got some Native American Lakota music playing. Music. Hey, Jessica Clark. Janet saying, "I love Scotland too." I do need a sign for my camper, Nikki. And I've been thinking about that. And I don't know if I need to do a takeaway home kit or if I need to do what I need to do. But I've really missed being at the Heartful Art Studio in Big Rapids. Yeah. I found this really great tire cover. It is of an Appalachian band of gnomes. It's really quite cool. So it's an Appalachian band of fiddle players and harmonica players, and you know what I'm saying. It's a really beautiful piece that I found on Etsy. Some Appalachian roots, and bring some smiles as we're traveling down the road with this really cool tire thing. But I've been thinking, Nikki, absolutely, I do need to have a piece of Heartful Art Studio with me. All right, art also create some sacred spaces. For those of you that have been here in my home, here in my office, I have an entire wall that is the Black Hills. And Donna King, it'll be wonderful when you get up here because, you and I have Native American roots that are very deep in the Southeast. And the entire wall of my office is an encampment. Now, it's not a Georgia way or Alabama, but it is a Native American scene. It's beautiful, the entire wall. And for me, having the wall painted with my ancestral roots creates a space of sacred for me. And of course, I have beautiful portraits and paintings and oil works of angels and various other things, and musical instruments in my home that represent sacred to me. My djembe drum, very sacred. My hand drum made by Sonia Holy Eagle, sacred. And it's not that I don't utilize them. I mean, I do believe one day I can see my grandson Easton with my hand drum down in the upstairs living room, or playing maybe the community drum that's down on the lowest level of the house, sitting underneath the buffalo head. Yeah, I have a buffalo head here in the house. It's in a sacred space on the lowest level of the home. And it was a gift to me. Yeah, that buffalo head apparently came about in the 1970s, and my son-in-law learned that it was going to be going to Goodwill or something like that. So he rescued it because he knew that I'm not really one for having the heads of anything in my house, but this is a rescue head. So I'm feeling okay because it's a rescued female buffalo head. And she, Lord only knows where she would have ended up. So she's magnificent. And she is downstairs, and on one of the walls and underneath her is the community drum that Sonia Holy Eagle created. It's the biggest drum that Sonia and her partner ever created. And so that's a sacred space. Lily, you remember when we brought that in here, all the bells and whistles and spirit that went off. One thing about maintaining a sacred space, everybody, is that when we do it, no matter where we're doing it, spirit knows we're doing it, and spirit shows up. Spirit shows up. Now, the night that I was gifted that buffalo head, I was called over to my daughter and son-in-law's house under the auspices of, Mom, there's a new baby horse across the way. My kids live across from a horse ranch. So I was giddy with excitement. And of course, Lily and Kelly and Kevin and Todd kept the secret. They're really good secret keepers. And I went over and I walked in, and here's this magnificent buffalo head, a Mother's Day gift from my son-in-law. Well, we brought it back and we smudged her and we sang to her and we drummed, and some pretty astonishing things happened. Spirit showed up. I think we even got some really cool photos, didn't we, Lily? Yeah. Oh yeah, Donna, you're going to love it. You're going to love it. It was one of the things that I love about my cousin Donna. Well, the list is long, but she and I having a conversation about our Seminole relatives, followed up by Aunt Dot. One of the very first things that after Aunt Dot, being Mama Dot, sat all of us very adult cousins down on her, in her living room, announcing to everybody, in case they didn't know, that her daddy, our granddaddy King, was Cherokee. Raised a few eyebrows because some people just didn't realize it. And for me, it was like going home. That was a sacred moment when Aunt Dot said, oh, and by the way, my daddy, your granddaddy, was a Cherokee man. That was a beautiful, sacred moment. And there are times, growing up and in my life where my soul knew that. At a very young age, I began painting. I did have some magnificent watercolors and etchings that I did. And I don't know where those went. Kelly remembers them because I showed them to Kelly. I was living in Minnesota at the time while Dad was stationed at Fort Snelling. And only later to learn that, right there near Fort Snelling, of course, is where President Lincoln put out the orders that 38 Native American chieftains would be hung by their neck until they were dead, right? There's a little slice of Abraham Lincoln that people don't know. There you have it. And so there are certain things in life that are sacred to me by virtue of the fact that it's part of my blood and bones. Part of my blood and bones. And sacred sometimes moves us, doesn't it? And I think sometimes we're experiencing sacred in our present life, but also Our ancestors travel with us. Sometimes I think we are our ancestors reincarnated, and so we have the experience of, some people say, deja vu. Boy, I remember stepping foot in Scotland for the very first time, and it literally took my breath away. Took my breath away. Sometimes that's how we know that we're in a sacred space. It takes our breath away, or it causes, you know, those tears that you get sometimes, and you don't know where they're coming from. One minute you're just being you, and the next minute you have a stream of silent tears going down your cheeks and dribbling off of your chin. Have you ever been in that kind of a sacred space? That's sacred. You can feel that spirit is already there. That's how spirit works with us. And when I say spirit, I'm talking about, yes, the angelics. I'm talking about Creator. I'm talking about our ancestors who have moved on. I'm talking about our four-leggeds that have moved on as well. Spirit, those without their physical body. Sometimes they'll come into physical body and come into your sacred space. I'm not saying that doesn't happen, because I do believe that most of us have entertained angels unaware. I believe that happens. I know that it happens because I've had that happen in my life. Katie is saying, I have several sacred places: in my house after work when it's just me, at the lake house by myself. Yeah. I love that. Having a space. Spirit says, oh, it's interesting because when Katie goes to that space, she's in a different space herself. When she goes to her sacred space, Katie is in a different space, another dimension, a different octave or vibration, as Sandy Herrick would say. And when we are in sacredness ourselves and we can feel the sacred, it opens up a window. It's magnificent. It opens up a window. It lifts the veil, some people say. Creates a portal, other people say. What it does is it creates a space where we can interact more succinctly or more clearly with spirit and vice versa. And sometimes it happens and we can't believe it happens, right? Boy, poor Todd. Well, not poor Todd, but boy, when Todd and I first were married, he kind of sort of knew what he was getting into when he married me, but probably not really. And thank goodness he's a Taurus, because he's very loyal and he will see something through to the end. But there were some eyebrow raising, still are some eyebrow raising things that go on in our home and out on the land. And sometimes he just shakes his head. And I'll just say to him, it comes with the ring. Remember that, it comes with the ring. Even, you know, in my home when I was a single mom raising all those kids and their friends, there would be things that would happen and people, young people, would be very surprised and curious about what was going on. Spirit's very playful. I think it's important to remember that spirit is alive and that we're not just human. We're not just human. We are spirits having a human experience. And I think right now, in the wonkiness of this great awakening, as I call it, it's a good thing to remember that we're not just human. We're something greater than that, having a human experience. This is pretty temporary. What are we going to make of it? What are we going to make of it? And we're all unique. We all have our own beliefs and thoughts and things about life around us and our own experience of life. What things mean to us. I think sometimes with social media and the media, we're being asked to become numb to our own uniqueness and our own beliefs and our own thoughts and the sacredness of that. You know, my thoughts about the Confederate flag are vastly different than the thoughts of a lot of people about the Confederate flag. And that's okay. We all get to have our own thoughts about things. My thoughts about the angels are vastly different than the thoughts about angels from a lot of people. And that's okay. On both sides of that, that's okay. We all get to have our own unique experience. This life is sacred. Exploring sacred, that's what we're here to do, is explore sacred in a human body. And what sacred means to me doesn't mean it to anybody else. And what somebody else might find sacred, I might roll my eyeballs, right? I'm rolling my eyeballs at that. But that doesn't mean they don't get to think it's sacred. They do. Some people have an opinion of war veterans that's very different than my thought about war veterans and what that means. Having my daddy's medals on the wall, Billy King, right? Thanks to my cousin Vicky, who filled out all the paperwork for me. I have all of my daddy's war medals. And there are some people who find that horribly offensive. I find it a beautiful tribute. And the space in my home that I have dedicated, if you've been in my home, you know on the lowest level of the home, I have a space, I call it my warrior walls. And on one wall is dedicated to Billy King, my biological daddy. And it has photos of him and it has all of his war medals. And just fabulous photos. And on the other wall, it's dedicated to the Sarge. And I no longer have his medals. Those were taken from me. But I do have all of the paperwork for every one of his medals. He made sure that I had those before he died. And so I have this magnificent piece framed from when he received the medal from the Army Joint Chiefs of Staff, and photos of the Sarge in Vietnam. So that's my warrior space. And yeah, I mean, it's based on the thought of war and medals and blood and God only knows what. And for some people, that's a repulsive thought. For me, when I walk into that space, I am in sacred. I'm in sacred. And sometimes sacred doesn't mean always beautiful. I know that for both my dad, the Sarge, and my dad, Billy King, coming back from Vietnam meant that for some of them, they were spit on, literally, and some spit on, metaphorically speaking. And yet, I've got walls filled with Vietnam war medals. Because they represent the sacred path of my fathers, plural, their soul's path. It represents their soul's path. And the literal blood that they shed and the metaphorical blood they shed. It's why sometimes when people go to the Wailing Wall or they go to a memorial of any type, when I was a little girl and my dad was stationed at the Pentagon, we would go once a year to Arlington National Cemetery. Some people don't find cemeteries particularly sacred. But once a year, my dad would take me to Arlington and we would, two things. We would stand and just look at the vastness of the sacred space of the National Cemetery, and we would watch the changing of the guard. And I can still hear the click of those heels, right? When that soldier would about face. And that was sacred. For me, that's sacred. That is not sacred to other people, but that's okay. When we were in Greece, Lily, Nikki, you'll remember this because you were with us in Athens, the changing of the guard there in Athens. Todd had never seen the changing of the guard. But the moment that the process began there, and it was beautiful because it was right across from our hotel there in Athens, everything became still. The guard was changing and it became sacred. Sacred. It got quiet. And it's those moments that reach into your soul. Yeah, that's goosebump stuff. Absolutely, Donna. It reaches into your soul and says, this is sacred. There's something sacred here. Some people put their life on the line. And for me, putting your life on the line, I don't care if you're a registered nurse, if you're a flight attendant, if you're putting your life on the line, that's a pretty sacred calling. Whether it's military, pilot, whatever, ambulance driver, doctor, you know what I'm saying? That is a sacred calling. Not everybody has that calling. Janet, you're a nurse. What a calling. That's sacred. I think we all have a sacred calling. And we all have definitions of sacred. Exploring that's really kind of what the show is about today. Where do you find sacred? And just because somebody doesn't agree with your sacred, that's okay. They don't have to agree. If I waited for everybody to agree with everything I've ever done in my life, I wouldn't have gone up to Standing Rock, Oceti Shakowee, when my brother Guy called me and said, "Sister, can you come up here to the camp at Standing Rock and help me pray?" For a lot of people looking at Standing Rock and the No DAPL Dakota Access Pipeline movement, some people did not consider that the least bit sacred. For me, that was sacred. And I did go up there, and I did spend days up there with my brother. And every morning we were up before the crack of dawn so that we could sit in sacred and watch Ampowichapki, the morning star woman, Venus, rise over the eastern side of the Cannonball River. Sacred moments with my brother Guy up at a camp of 10,000 people, protesting that pipeline going in and all of the bones. They drove that pipeline right through native burial grounds. That's sacred to some people, burial grounds. And when my nephews came back to our little camp and their backs were shot up from rubber bullets, I said, "George, what happened? How come you're all shot up?" I could not believe the damage rubber bullets could do, number one. He said, "Because, Auntie, there was an elderly. She was collecting bones. She was standing in the middle of the river collecting the bones as they were floating by her. And on the other side, the DAPL people were shooting at this elderly Native woman as she was retrieving the sacred bones because that pipeline was going through her relatives." And my nephews, being good gentlemen, right, Alex and George, they went to help this elderly woman. And as they were helping her, they were all shot up. Those bones, to all of them, to me, to many of you, those are sacred. Helping that elderly person who was trying to take the bones of her relatives to safety as the pipeline was being pushed through it. For some, that's a sacred moment. For others, there's no sacredness in any of it. It was a sacred moment this week. I saw Lily had posted on Facebook about the DAPL that the judge had ordered, at least temporarily, the oil drained from that pipeline. There I was with my grandson, and it was one of those moments where I was, and then the next minute, the tears came down. Silent tears came down. And I knew that my brother Guy, who's now in spirit, who was the chieftain of that Standing Rock camp, he was the chieftain of the Oceti Shakowee camp, the Great Sioux Nations camp. I knew he was smiling on the other side because he and I had many, many conversations. Conversations are sacred too, aren't they? Some conversations are profoundly sacred. And when we all, the pipeline went through, and it began polluting the only reservoir for those people, the native people on the reservation up there. Just as they knew their water supply was being polluted by oil. He and I had many conversations. He said that he felt like he failed. He felt like a failure. And he said to me one day, Mitankala, what difference did it make? Did I make a difference? All that time that I was up there, that all of us were up there making those prayers, did it make a difference? And I looked at him and I said, Tiblo, which means older brother. I said, Tiblo, you started a movement around the world. People are now aware of the preciousness of water. That water is sacred. And I said, here's another thing that you did. Because my brother Guy, he was a Vietnam veteran too. He was a parachuter, right? He was also a well-ensconced member and vital member of the American Indian movement. Not everybody finds that sacred either, right? That's okay. But every day after those prayers and before, he let everybody go from the camp, from the sacred fire at the camp, he would say to everybody on the loudspeaker over the camp, love one another, be good to one another. And he would go on and on. I said, you gave everybody that message every morning for that entire camp, Tiblo. That's sacred. If they don't carry away anything other than a respect for the water of Grandmother Earth, they walk away with the words that you said every morning. Love one another. Be good to one another. Care for one another. If you don't speak somebody's language, find a mutual language that you can both use. Help one another. It's what we came here to do. Right? That's sacred, I said to him. You help to create a movement and awareness. So, when I was looking at that the other day, it brought those silent tears. And I know that he's enjoying that on the other side. Sacred. Holding it in high regard. We don't all hold in high regard the same things. What one person's heart holds in high regard, another person's heart is hardened to, maybe just not open to, has not been exposed to, maybe an awareness has not been made. And the reason that I wanted to, just kind of visit this morning with everybody is because sometimes if we see somebody else's opinion being different than ours, sometimes maybe we question our thought about what's sacred. Or maybe we're not willing to say, I wonder why they find that sacred. And are there many ways to look at one thing? Does it have to be black, gray, and white? Can it be a rainbow color of reasons why people find something sacred? It doesn't have to be black or white or black, gray, and white. It can be a rainbow color of why other people find something sacred and we don't. Exploring that, I think, is a great gift that I was given growing up. I was not born knowing why some people found the Buddha sacred. I wasn't born knowing why some people found Guanyin sacred or whatever. I found that out when I was 8 and Dad was stationed in Hawaii. And we had a really great neighbor, Mr. and Mrs. Gordon. They didn't have any children of their own. And I used to go there and she would teach me about the Buddha. And she would teach me about Guanyin, the goddess. She would teach me all of these wonderful things. And so I could understand then why Mrs. Gordon from Korea thought that they were sacred. I'd never even heard those names before, but she taught me. And I have many experiences of that growing up in a military family. You move from place to place, and we weren't allowed to criticize. That was not happening. We were told to ask questions in a good way. Find out why. Well, go find out why. Right? Mr. and Mrs. Jones, they were from North Carolina across the way, and they were Cherokee. Dick and Portia Jones. And when you walked into their home, they're on the military base up in Schofield. When you walked into their home, there were beautiful eagle feather pieces. And I remember Mrs. Jones, oh, she was just so cute. She wore really these dark glasses, very interesting dark frame glasses. I remember that about her, and her hair went down past her butt. And she was very soft-spoken. And I remember going over to her home, and she would teach me about eagle. That felt really familiar to me. That was in my blood and bones. So my blood and bones knew, oh, I was only 8, 9, 10 years old, so I didn't get the full scope of it. But she taught me why she felt that the eagle was sacred, that every living thing was sacred. Even the rocks and the plumeria trees that were out there, the hibiscus plant, everything, she said, everything has creator, she told me. Not everybody believes that a tree is sacred. Not everybody believes that animals have souls. Not everybody believes that animals go to heaven. Right? I do, but not everybody does. It's not that I believe they do, I know they do. Some people find certain forms of art not sacred. I love art. Some forms of art for me are very sacred, and others I kind of have to mull it about, don't we? To mull it about. Sacred foods. Some foods are sacred. Now, my sister Barbara has been for years teaching me how to make sacred food. From the wasna. Now I know how to make cornmeal wasna, let alone the backstrap deer wasna with the berries and the cherries and the raisins, and sacred food for sacred ceremonies. I make a really good wojapi, the blueberry pudding. The blueberries are very sacred food. I love it when I can bring the cherries and the wojapi blueberries from Michigan. We're kind of famous for blueberries and cherries here in Michigan. It's always an exciting thing when I can bring Traverse City cherries. And they're made into sacred food. Well, what makes them sacred? Well, they're made in a sacred way, and that means that you're in a prayerful state when you make them. If you go to a church where the host is served, the wafer, you know that those are supposed to be made in a good way. They're made holy. I kind of like for myself to think that all meals are sacred, But there are sacred foods that are at sacred ceremonies. Not everybody is going to understand why a buffalo berry is sacred. I have in my freezer some frozen buffalo berry wasna. Buffalo berry, the elders believe, is a cure-all for everything that ails you. So we've made buffalo berry wasna or wojapi here, and I have some in the freezer. I have wasna in the freezer here. Sacred food. I love it when somebody says, why is that sacred to you? Why is that special to you? What does it mean to you? Not what does it mean to everybody on a certain Facebook page? What does it mean to everybody who believes this? What does it mean to you? Help me to understand that. That's a great question, isn't it? What does it mean to you? To some people who would look at my fathers, plural, their Vietnam and Korea medals, some looking at those medals represents something maybe really ugly. And well, they get to think that. I mean, it's their thought. It's their sense of things. When I look at them, it represents two men. One who is in my blood and bones and one who raised these blood and bones, right? and their journey. I honor their journey. Why does that mean that to you? Why does Native America mean so much to you? Dana, why do you take care of children on a reservation thousands of miles away from where you live? Well, I happen to believe that all children are our children. I once posted that on Facebook, and a woman responded by, American children are our children. Oh, I just had to unfriend her really quick. For me, that's a basic principle of humanity, is that all children are our children. I don't care where those babies are. I don't. If there's a baby out there in need, and maybe because I was one of those, but I think it's more than that. If there is a child in need, then all of humanity needs to say, there's a baby in need. Those babies need. That's sacred. Babies are sacred. And I don't care where they come from or who their mom and daddy is or isn't. That's sacred. So that's why I find children sacred. I don't care what color they are, where they come from, whether they speak English, whether they have the proper documents. Because here's the thing, you know what, when we're all dead and gone out of these human bodies, the view from the other side, everybody, looks a whole lot different. It looks a whole lot different. And in my 57 years of talking to folks on the other side with that very different view, and having that view myself since I managed to walk out of my body in 2005, thanks to a stroke, taking a look and asking questions is a good thing, because, you know, on the other side, our own shallow opinions, our own persistent or stubborn ignorance. I mean, ignorance is one thing. You don't know what you don't know, but there is persistent or stubborn ignorance that says, I do know better, but doggone it, I've always felt this way and I'm not going to be open to anything new. That's what I'm saying about stubborn or persistent ignorance. When we get to the other side, we get to review that stubborn, persistent ignorance, shallowness, opinions. You know, the Sarge always had a thought about opinions. And pardon my French, but I'm just going to say it how the Sarge said it at least once a week. Opinions are like assholes. We all have one and they all stink. Right? That's what I grew up hearing. I'm pretty sure that when I was 3, I was probably already saying that. And he was right. But coming to find out why somebody has that thought or opinion or holds something sacred, it's interesting. Some are informed opinions, some are uninformed, and we all have them. But I want to know what people find sacred and why. Why is that? I don't go to social media to study sacred. I know. So I find really good teachers if I want to know about sacred. I go explore it for myself. I go right there. Land is sacred. Grandmother Earth is sacred. She holds a lot of sacred memories. Right? If you stand in a really sacred spot, like some of the standing stone circles, in Scotland and Wales and England and Ireland and even here in Michigan, right? We've got some pretty amazing places. This past year in October, me and Donna and Todd, we went to some pretty sacred spaces there in Georgia, native spaces. Oh my goodness. You feel the sacred. The minute your feet touch the earth, you feel it. She's got a lot of stories, grandmother. And there's a lot of people who on the other side, because they're constantly visiting with me, and it's not always the people that are in peaceful places. Like when you're a seer, people will say, what's that like for you, Dana, that you can see people in spirit? Well, it's not usually the people that are, I'm just stopping by because I'm so peaceful, and I just want to tell you how groovy it is here on the other side. I live such a wonderful life and it's peaceful and I'm sipping my favorite coffee and I just wanted to fly by and let you know everything is good over here. No. Well, I wish it was, but it isn't. Usually, it's the people on the other side who are unsettled, who perhaps feel that they want me to be their confessor. Right? Sister Dana, I'm going to go confess all of my shortcomings about all of my opinions because they did stink, right? It's the unsettled spirits that stop by most frequently. They're unsettled. What unsettles them? Usually, it's the experiences of their lifetime here on Grandmother. A lot of it is the experiences that they perpetuated. They're unsettled. I really don't want to be one of those people. And I don't want to be one of those people, especially who has to wait until the last rites of unction, right? That's what they do in the Catholic Church. Quick, call a priest. That's why a lot of people, before they pass away, they want to talk about stuff. They want to get it settled. And I've never, ever had anybody just show up and say, I'm so glad that I used to beat my wife and kids. God, that was a good thing that I did. I'm so happy I was an abuser. I'm so happy that I didn't care about anybody other than myself. Right? It's the Ebenezer Scrooge story. Jacob Marley's that stopped by everybody. It's the Jacob Marleys. Men and women, not just men. They got something to say and all right. I don't want to be a Jacob Marley. Doesn't mean I have to agree with everybody, but at least allow people, if they're not hurting people, right there I have a, yeesh, some of the things that go on in humanity. It's why we need to find a sacred space. Have a sacred space. And to just understand that sacred isn't the same thing to everybody. Donna King is saying, I found a cigarette filter in my car this weekend. No tobacco. And what does that mean to you, cousin? My lovely cousin. So my cousin Donna also has a gypsy soul. Like me. Don't you, cousin? Kimberly's saying, I always felt that the love for children was what brought us all together. It was the one uniting force. Yeah, should be. But that's, how you and I think. I'll tell you, walking in to gather our children home out there on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation and seeing all those sweet faces looking at us. Gee, all these little ones looking at us all like grandmas and grandpas and aunties and uncles. They don't care what color your skin is or what shade of brown or what color your eyes are. I remember one of the first times that I went out to Pine Ridge, I was at a ceremony. And after the ceremony, a fight broke out. There was this fight going on. The tribal police were called, and one of the little girls, oh, she's cute as a bug. Anyway, I was just sitting outside the fire, literally and figuratively watching this fisticuffs between two women go on, and the tribal police show up. And this little girl, watching me sitting outside the ring of fire and fighting, walked up to me. Oh, cute as a little bug. And she was rubbing my forearm. And she just looked at me. She was probably 4, and she looked at me and she said, Unchi, which means grandma, Unchi, your skin isn't as brown as my skin. My skin is browner than yours. I said, well, you have beautiful skin. She said, you have beautiful skin. And she giggled and she said, we both have beautiful skin. But she had just noticed, because her hand, she was scared, watching these two women battle it out. I mean, it was like, dang, Jerry Springer gone wild, watching these two women go at it. Well, it scared her because she's little. Kind of scared me because they were getting a little too close for comfort, right? So in her being afraid, she grabbed my forearm for comfort. And looking at her hand on my forearm, she discovered that we didn't have the same shade. But she discovered that, and she knew innately. She didn't have to discover, she knew out loud. We both have beautiful skin. Oh my, that was a sacred moment for me, out of the mouth of that little girl. There we were. I said to her, would you like me to tell you a story? So she didn't have to, be preoccupied by these two women literally pounding the snot out of one another in front of us. So I took her by the hand and we went to another little remote spot and I told her a story. I created a story. Made a sacred space. Donna's saying, my first experience with tobacco offerings, it was a reminder. That's right. Offering tobacco, when the three of us went to those sacred hills there in Georgia, we did tobacco offerings. And Donna had never done tobacco offerings. And sometimes you just have to use a cigarette and you don't, you just take the tobacco out of the cigarette. Not everybody finds that sacred. Spirit that understands the sacredness of it, understands it. And there, she found it the other day, I think, which was quite auspicious. A reminder of sacred. With that, everybody, we're at the bottom of the hour. We got a late start today. It was a busy, busy morning here in the Enchanted Forest. Thank you all for walking sacredly upon Grandmother Earth, wherever you happen to be walking. Thank you for being open to how others find life sacred, or not. Thank you for bringing others to your sacred space with prayer, upliftment. And thank you for being you, because just by being you, that's pretty doggone sacred. You're welcome. Thank you, everybody. Have a beautiful day. Blessings be.